I am here today with Jade Herriman, who is a transpersonal art therapist and accredited Barbara Shear life coach based in Sydney, Australia. She works as an art therapist with clients in mental health, women's health, and parents and children, as well as supporting professional women with many interests to bring their creative dreams to life. She is a keen art maker, participates in multiple male art projects, and loves the way creativity can be a release, joy, mirror, comfort, inspiration, and more. She loves social media for the connection it brings. So I'm very excited to have Jade all the way from the other side, definitely, of the world. It's early morning kind of there, and it's kind of winding down sort of on my end. So I very much appreciate you joining us, especially with the time zone change. And welcome to this series.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. It's really lovely to be here. I feel honoured to be part of this chat. And I am still waking up slightly, so bear with me.
That is okay. I'm winding down a little bit. I'll be heading to bed. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, yes. So I've been opening up all of the chats with the same question, and that is, if you remember the first time either that you used the internet or social media in relationship to art therapy or art and creativity, but maybe as a student in training or before you started training, if you kind of remember what you sort of did online.
It's such a good question. And I guess I was thinking about it, and I was thinking in terms of being online, obviously as a student, researching, watching YouTube videos of therapists, that kind of thing. But I guess the moment that felt to me like a real milestone was when I did my first blog post as an art therapist. And that was, I actually had to double check the date, but it was May 2015. And I actually wrote about my first paid work as an art therapist. So it was an article about that kind of moment in time of transitioning from, having done lots of placement hours, etc., to then the first paid gig, and kind of like that. I think it was called "You Don't Have to Be Perfect to Be Useful." So it was that kind of self-reflection on stepping into the professional practice. So that was a bit of a moment in time for me in terms of social media and wearing that art therapist hat in a public space. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very rememberable moment, big milestone, big sort of step. What was it that inspired you to start the blog as an art therapist?
Yeah, well, I kind of felt that because I was going to be in private practice, I needed a website. So I went ahead and created one, and I happened to use WordPress, which I'd never used before. And I must say was a little bit hard to start with. I kind of hated it for the first few days of diving in. But really then I realized it wasn't that I hated it as a platform. It's just that I wasn't comfortable and familiar in there yet. But once I got the hang of it, then it felt really easy to use. Anyway, so I set up the website, and I think I just knew that I wanted to have a blogging element to that, partly as a space to process and make sense and kind of make meaning of my professional journey, and also to share really good resources that I'd come across, and to connect with other art therapists. And it's kind of evolved since then, but from the start I think that I wanted blogging to be part of my professional face online, and also just part of my own professional practice.
You're very consistent and sort of regular as far as sharing content and having steady sort of posting, which I know can be a challenge. It's something I struggle with at times, and I think many other bloggers sort of do out there. And I know this is sort of a side kind of question, but are there anything sort of routines or practices that you have for coming up with content or kind of scheduling that? Because that can be a real challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Mhm.
absolutely, and I know that. Yeah, a lot of people set out with great intentions, and then it's kind of like, hit the dry spell, or what am I going to write about, or that happens. Look, for me, yeah, I love talking about this. So thanks for asking. There's probably kind of a couple of things I did. Firstly, and this wouldn't work for everyone, but for me, around blogging in particular, I just made a decision at the start that I was going to blog once a week. And even though I'm not someone who generally works well with a lot of highly prescriptive kind of structure and KPIs and targets, for me, it was kind of like I'd made a commitment to myself, and I had that number in my head. And so rather than kind of like thinking, oh, do I feel like writing this week? Or, gee, how often will I write? And getting all tangled up in that, I just have this baseline of it's once a week. And then it just becomes part of my landscape, and I know that that's what I need to do. So that was quite helpful for me. Scheduling, like if people aren't blogging yet, just to know that, you don't have to be there writing it 2 minutes before you hit publish, that you can schedule these things in advance. And so if you're feeling really inspired, and you even write a couple of in a day, kind of batch it, that you can schedule those out for the weeks to come. So definitely use that. And some weeks are busier with client work, and then I find I'm not doing much writing, but other weeks it's kind of like a taking stock week, and it's more writing, and then I can schedule those out. So that they're kind of two things that helped. But this other one, I guess the other thing is, for me, it's something about writing when it feels like juicy, like writing when the thing's really in my head and I feel fired up about it, rather than sitting down and thinking, oh, I have to write something. What will I write about? And so for me, having like a smartphone that I can take with me in my handbag means sometimes I'll be writing down blog post ideas in a queue while I'm waiting for a coffee, or on a train or whatever. So that kind of thing really helps, because it catches the idea while it's fresh, and the enthusiasm, and so on. And then I've got something to work with later as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wherever the inspiration kind of strikes, that's great.
Yeah.
Like using your mobile kind of phone to kind of record those
Yeah.
ideas, and planning things out in advance as well, ideas and things. So then when things get sort of dry or more challenging to kind of think of, you can go back to that. Yeah, I've done similar, probably not as organized. Usually I just scribble them on post-it notes and kind of stick them sort of in various places, and then sometimes I just let ideas like linger too long, and it's really not like significant anymore, the time frame or something, or I'm not as excited about it. And
Yeah.
that I find sometimes when I'm not forcing it, it just sort of it's no problem, but when you're sort of like, oh, I've got to think of something, it's
Yeah.
no, it just won't happen. So
Yeah. And I think that thing of like, also, I don't know how it is for you, but I find, and I know you're really involved in kind of like training, delivery, and going to conferences and stuff like that. For me, I find that when I engage in that way with my work, with different professionals, or even like having a conversation like this, is kind of fertile ground where at the end of that, I'm usually have lots of ideas, and they're the great ones for diving into a blog post. So if it's just having been to some kind of professional development that sparked my thinking about how does that idea actually work with my practice, or what have I seen around that, then taking that and kind of using it, that idea as a basis for a blog post, can be quite helpful. Yeah.
Great. Those are great suggestions. I know that you also use social media platforms in regards to creative expression and your own kind of creative practice, getting involved in different mail sort of exchanges and online kind of sort of pursuits and challenges. How does social media kind of help you connect to that artist aspect of yourself?
Yeah, I think social media has been really important for me in taking my art making just from the wholly personal and kind of not shared, and the, you know, sitting in journals and sitting in shoeboxes kind of stage to, finding other people who enjoy making in the same way that I do, but also having that courage to kind of share work and practice, you know, being seen, and practice being received in a kind, you know, kind of way. So all the things that we try to create, I guess, in an art therapy session for our clients around making as a tool for expression and getting away from the judgment and the competition and the, you know, the maybe other approaches to art making that they might have experienced. But actually, in the right groups and in the right spaces online, we can have that kind of experience as well. I've certainly found that. And I have to say, Gretchen, your program, was it 6 Degrees of Creativity, was one of my first experiences of really
that's
connecting
where
with people
we
online.
first connected, right? Was on
6
Degrees of Creativity.
Absolutely.
I think we were still in school, like not done yet. Yes.
I was. So thanks to you for that. And, you know, that connection with other people around the world. I really like that fires up my imagination in some way, that I think is why mail art really appeals to me, because there's a physical exchange and it's often global, and it's that little glimpse into other communities and just other places. So I think that one then led me to ICAD, the index carded day.
Yes,
you had mentioned
yellow
that.
and Timmy's.
So that was something I'd got involved in. And then, it's just that great, beautiful thing of one thing kind of leads to another. And so online, I've really enjoyed the Art Abandonment Project.
There's like a whole group specifically for art abandonment.
I did that for a while, and now I actually have my own group that deals with particular kind of mail art called letter journals. So it's a constant kind of playground for exchanging and doing swaps and sharing. It's online space as well.
And that's on Facebook, right? That group?
I've made it a secret group.
Oh, okay.
Because it is open. I take new members for about 4 times a year. But we've done really mean that we're not getting spam, you know, we're not getting just random requests to join all the time. So it feels like it's kind of like all friends and friends of friends, or friends of friends of friends, and it's grown in that organic way, or through word of mouth, which is really nice. So it feels like a safe kind of space, and it's just a great place for people who are into mixed media and mail art and that kind of thing. So that's where it's at the moment. But so many different ways to connect in art making online, and I guess it's just that's a real ongoing journey to find all the different forums and formats and the new people, and like I said, it just feels like it constantly evolves.
I know I see a lot of your art also on Instagram as well that you share, and I feel that the visual aspect of Instagram, something that we've talked about in some of the other chats, is really appealing as an artist and an art therapist, to be able to see sort of that format, to kind of just scroll through images. And I know I enjoy seeing, you know, what you've shared sort of as well, like pop up and, you know, my feed as I'm kind of rolling kind of through mostly on my phone.
Instagram's great, and I was a bit of a latecomer to Instagram. I think I only joined at the end of last year, and so that's been, to be honest, that's been part of the challenge, I think, of using social media as a new graduate and a new kind of professional in the space, is feeling a bit, especially in that first year, you know, sometimes the overwhelm that can come with, like, oh my gosh, there's 5 million platforms and I'm not on all of them and I should be on all of them, and you know, what's my plan? So for me, giving myself permission to kind of stage it was actually really important for just feeling okay in what I was doing. And so that's where, like, I started with a blog, and then I had the Facebook business page. I got onto Twitter because my coaching teacher was on Twitter and was encouraging us, and she was 79, and I thought, oh my gosh, like if Barbara's on Twitter, I really need to lift my game.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, because she was nagging us. So I did.
Was that like a class assignment or something that you had to do is like a Twitter account?
Yeah, it was. So I did that. And then Instagram came later, and I did have that resistance, to be honest, around, and I think we're all different in terms of how we engage with technology and learn about technology, but I've realized over the years, my strength is using it. My strength isn't learning it to start with. I'm not an early adopter. I get a bit of like, oh, seriously? Like another password and another thing to learn, and I won't have time. But once I then get in it, I love it. And so Instagram, has definitely been like that for me. Yeah. I think Pinterest is the one that I've kind of like tiny dabbled toe in the water, haven't quite got there yet. So it's also it's kind of like I build on the foundations, I think, and when one thing becomes easy and second nature and stops feeling like it's taking any much time or energy to maintain, then it's kind of like, okay, I've got the energy to tackle a new one now.
Yeah,
that resonates. You seem to be across them all.
Yeah, the learning curve or the energy kind of curve, to use new platforms that we're adapting or that come out in meaningful sort of ways, not just to kind of have the account, but, can we sort of juggle various different places? And, that's also been a topic of discussion about balancing those things, or some people kind of devoting their time to certain platforms and not others, because, it can be very difficult and challenging and a lot of work, especially if you have a job, like to kind of stay on top of. You could spend all day,
definitely.
You can't, So,
definitely. And I think also just feeling into what kind of conversation happens on the different platforms, like what kind of sharing. And certainly for me, I've just kind of like I use Twitter in quite a different way to how I use Facebook, how I use Instagram, and it's not necessarily how other people would choose to use that. But for me, Twitter, for example, I don't know, I feel a bit more removed from Twitter. Maybe I don't know why, but it feels like it's definitely more professional. It's more about research. It's more about sharing news, that kind of thing. I don't kind of do as much personal reflection on Twitter. It's evolved into a certain feel for me, Twitter, and it's still it's about my work, but it's just a different slice of my work that I feel comfortable sharing on Twitter. So it's interesting also how that evolves, and to get a feel for what might feel right on different platforms. And I think with Instagram as well, what's been interesting is, as my practice is evolving and my clients that I'm working with evolving, what I'm offering is evolving, there's also that thing about what aspect of our work do we represent on social media, and if there's things that we're still figuring out, am I really into that area of the work, or am I not, or am I moving more towards this, how that can lead to a bit of a holding back feeling maybe on social media, because not quite clear exactly what the exact space is that we're playing in. So I've noticed as well that as I go through transitions in my work around moving from one kind of client group to another, or starting to engage in a different aspect of the work, that's shaping how I post and how readily I post. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, how there's a different maybe energy or kind of audience or activity or engagement depending on the platform and what you're growing into or growing out of, as a clinician, or the populations of clients that you're working with in your own interests professionally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
that's interesting too.
Yeah, that's a really I think helpful kind of consideration to think about in regards to how we, as art therapists or as artists, and also maybe even, personally, how we like engage in social media, and in what ways we do that and where, and sort of how we communicate the things we want to communicate, and being mindful of that.
Yeah.
Have you noticed like different audiences depending on the type of platform, like on Twitter versus maybe Facebook or Instagram?
Definitely. On Twitter, I mostly connect with other art therapists, charitable organizations, other therapy organizations. It feels to me like a much more kind of professional, if you like, peer-to-peer space. On Facebook, I feel like I have more potential clients engaging in my Facebook kind of business page and that feed. And then there's the art making space, which is much more a group space on Facebook. And I think there could be a little bit of overlap between some of those people and people who could potentially be clients, but I'm there with a different hat on. And so, it's much more, it's peer-to-peer as artists. And on Instagram, it's kind of like, on Instagram, I've taken, this might be too detailed for our discussion, but on Instagram, it was interesting. I decided not to do it as just an art therapy feed. It is a public, like my Instagram handle, is that what we call it? And so it's carefully curated in the sense that because it's a public thing, it's not wholly personal. It's not the all and the everything of my personal life, but it's a bit about my garden, and it's a bit about my art making. It's a bit about, pretty things I see on my travel. And I've kept my professional role much smaller in my Instagram feed. So it's a little bit about, I'm off to a workshop and it's a lovely day, but it's not loaded up with kind of news about art therapy, and it's not lots of photos of, me setting up for workshops and that kind of thing. So it's present, but I felt like, and I don't know why, it was almost just an instinctive thing. I felt like Instagram wanted to be more personal, but a public representation of the personal, if that makes sense. And Twitter for me is just professional. So it's quite interesting.
Got it. Yeah. It sounds like you've been very intentional sort of and mindful about the content you're wanting to, like you said, curating or kind of putting out there, which I think it is great. I think it also takes like energy, to do that.
Totally.
It's like headspace, kind of thinking kind of about that. But I think, because I think I often try to, sometimes I feel like I do it too much, but like, be very thoughtful about the content that is being kind of communicated, and the role and all of those things, 'cause, Yeah.
And I think, one of the reasons for that kind of thinking for me, and probably everyone who's in this space, is that, and this goes without saying, it's pretty obvious, but that like social media is a way that we connect with friends and family, as well as potentially a way we connect with clients, peers, etc. And so it's not just about, maintaining a professional face in our professional accounts or feeds or whatever, but also that thing of still having a space that's authentically not just work, that we can connect with other people. And so for me around Instagram, that was my compromise. It was like, at this stage I only want one account. And I don't want to be that person who is only ever posting about work and really annoying, their friends and family who actually want to connect in a social way. But I don't want to not have a public presence on Instagram, and I want it to be coherent with what I'm happy to share in the public realm of my private self, which is, I do like these things. And, so there's nothing contentious and there's nothing, too revealing or personal. But it's that balance, I think, as well, of having a social connection with our social contacts as well as our work contacts, and how to do both, and still have time left for everything else.
That definitely can be a challenge kind of implement and keep in the forefront. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's easy to become overwhelmed or I don't know, kind of removed from it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like, as we're talking, I'm realizing it's kind of, I see it a bit as, and I don't know if this is yet relevant, but I see it, it's this issue of social media is a platform for communicating, but what is it we're communicating? And part of what we communicate is our identity, or us, this kind of, I guess, the mask, the professional mask, or the personal mask. And so are they completely separate? There's this trend towards in social media, revealing aspects of the self that, 10 years ago would have been seen as irrelevant or unprofessional, I think, in a business conversation. And yet, now you see a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of, business people talking about, their hobbies and interests, etc. And, there's an interest in having that. And it speaks of authenticity. And a lot of companies get a flack, I think, if they haven't caught up with that way of thinking. And they're still using social media just to sell and just to do the party line. And there's no frivolity or there's no kind of whimsy in their feed, So there is this. So I see it now as kind of, I have my professional face in social media and my personal, but there's almost like a semi-permeable membrane. And so some of the work stuff I like to talk about in my, my wall or on Facebook, because it's part of who I am and it's part of what's happening in my life, and I want my friends and family to know. But it's not a wholly permeable membrane.
Yeah, it's not all of you.
Because I don't need to know everything. Yeah. And then in the other direction, the same, like in the professional space, to share a little bit of what's going on, interests and life, but not all of it. And that's obviously really important as a therapist as well. But I don't know, it's somehow coming to make sense of that in a way that works as well. It's not just setting up the feeds and creating content. There's that kind of thinking as well.
Yeah. And I think those are questions and dilemmas and content that, are being more thoughtfully sort of discussed within mental health kind of professions and organizations, and trying to sort of make better sense of that, having professional kind of presence and like the personal presence and what that all means, because social media is so embedded into what we do. I mean, just a culture, it's not going to go away, which I think initially there were thoughts about, is this going to stick around or what?
Yeah.
But it hasn't. And so how do you safely and ethically, we talked about this in one of the other chats too, navigate social media, to be able to professionally engage in whatever capacity that may be.
Absolutely.
So
and I can't wait to read your book, because I'm sure there's lots of great.
I mean, there's so many kind of dilemma, but not like a whole lot of definite sort of answers that come from that. And I feel that as technology evolves and social media or whatever that sort of might be in its form in the future, that'll just continue to bring up more kind of issues. Technology moves so fast, and protocol and all of that sort of stuff all over, it takes quite a bit of time to catch up. It's all, a late adopter as well, because feeling that out, and how that, I don't know,
absolutely
us. So very, very fascinating kind of conversation sort of around that. So you mentioned places where people can find you on social media. You have a page on Facebook, right?
I've got Jade Herriman Art Therapy and Coaching on Facebook.
And then Instagram.
That's Herriman Jade.
Yes. And then Twitter was another sort of one. Is there anything else that's missing?
No, just yeah,
Read,
just
and then your
blog.
blog as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
Yeah. Well, I will definitely link the different sort of places that people can connect you if they're interested in learning more about your work and the topics and art that you share. I know I enjoy
thank you.
seeing it and reading it and sharing it, and all of that. And it's great to I don't know, see that consistent kind of energy out there of putting things out, especially with the blogging.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And I guess I just say on the blogging, because I didn't mention before, the interesting thing is that it has been it's been a great excuse to also get in touch with other people,
Mm.
and obviously we spoke and
Yeah,
and
because you've
last
interviewed.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so like,
yeah.
yeah, thank you
So
for
I know,
including that.
yeah, and I just know that if people haven't yet or are wondering, as art therapists, oh, is it worth it? It's going to take me all this time. Now there's all these ethical issues, and what about
Mhm.
privacy? It can feel a bit too hard, but it's also very rewarding, I think, and
Mm.
it gives us a way to connect with others. It's kind of like, yeah, whether it's through just kind of tagging people in Twitter or dropping them an email and asking to interview them or
Mhm.
something. It gives
Mhm.
us a way to connect and a kind of an excuse to connect, a reason to then have a conversation.
Mhm.
And that's really lovely. And I can't imagine exactly how some of those connections I've made would have happened
With that.
without social media as
Mhm.
that focal point between us, like you and me having this conversation
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, the one that
Probably
we had before.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's probably less likely that, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe we would have, but out of the blue, really, on a busy week, would you just
Yeah.
say, hey, I
Yeah.
really feel like
I
talking to you
knew.
about social media. Do you want to put
Yeah.
aside half an hour? And we'd go, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
in an ideal world, we might do that, but lives get busy. But yeah, whether it's an interview or it's like, hey, I'm sharing this thing with you, or hey, I really like that thing you wrote. It's a great way to connect with peers. And as someone like starting their own business or private practice as an art therapist, what I've noticed is oftentimes I'm the only person with that hat on in the organization. So there aren't other art therapists to chat with about the fine grain of practice and so on. So, although we have supervision and supervision groups, how lovely to have a way to hook
Mhm.
up with people from around the world who are, those few steps ahead or, yeah, exploring similar ideas. So
Mhm.
it's totally been worth it for that. And I've also found that when I work with client organizations, I've had the feedback that they've gone and checked it out and they've read it, and it gives them a sense of who I am and how I approach my work and whether they feel like we're aligned or not. So,
Mhm.
I know, I just think with social media, there's a lot of talk about the time and the effort and the scheduling, and it
Mhm.
can just feel really hard. But, I think once you find a way that fits with your schedule and your strengths. I mean, I like writing,
Mhm.
so I blog,
Mhm.
but I know people who just do videos, they just do short
Mhm.
videos. They love the Facebook Live because they're good at doing that stuff. So once you find the way that fits, I can see that it is really helpful, I think.
Is there anything else that you would like to either say or sort of leave people with before we kind of wrap up?
I just want to say as well, in that professional space, so using our social media to connect with other art therapists, one thing I've noticed is that the dialogue around what, the kind of what is art therapy, what art therapy
Mhm.
is, the kind of, the colouring phase, these
Yeah.
discussions,
Mhm.
live discussions around what is and isn't and use of language and stuff. I see it, for me, I have those discussions online. I don't have them face to face with other
Mhm.
professionals. So that's happening. And then also, yeah, as issues come up in the field internationally around, say, there's been obviously a live discussion in the US lately about politics and political leanings and
Mhm.
policy and,
Mhm.
support for art therapy and those kinds of things. And is all support good support? And, should there be conditions around that, etc. That to me is, if it wasn't for the online space and social media, I would not be having I wouldn't have been reading it, let alone have the
Mm.
opportunity to jump in and have views on that. And
Mm.
similarly, a little bit of just really practical exchange. And I think for me, this is an area that is underdeveloped and there's room to grow. And I've thought about some ideas myself in the space, which is extending our peer networks in a really practical way internationally. So having a space where we can basically phone a friend, and it's not to replace supervision, but it's for the practical stuff like, hey guys, I'm just starting to work with in this new context, and this is a bit of a stretch for me. Where's your go-to resource for that? Because we all study a million things, we can't remember them all, but to be able to connect with peers in that way, around the practicalities, the detail, the kind of ongoing professional reflection, I feel like there's a lot of room to grow that as well, because some of that's happening already and it's really valuable. One of the reasons that social media is the place that kind of international dialogue about what art therapy is, what it's becoming, how it navigates certain kind of challenges, is that in social media space, we can come together regardless of which kind of accreditation we have, regardless of which professional body we're joined with, because sometimes our physical comings together are dictated by, which state we're licensed in or which country we're whatever. Whereas this is a way to kind of, build a sense of the profession across those boundaries. And I think that's really important. And I don't know where else that would happen, apart from conferences, which people can't always afford to go to. So, to me, that's a really exciting space as well. What do we build together? What do we imagine together? What do we clarify together? That kind of thing. Yeah.
It's very inspiring to kind of hear your sort of thoughts and reflections kind of about the sort of space of social media and how that's impacted you and will sort of continue to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.